Today is Wednesday, July 10th. We are now live with the latest in the crypto world. It's 9:30 a.m. in New York City, 2:30 p.m. in London, 10:30 p.m. in Tokyo, and 3:30 p.m. here in Malta. Jason Fernandez and Jose Maria Macedo will discuss the markets with us on today's show. But first, let's take a look at some of the market indicators. The cryptocurrency index CCI 30 has jumped above the 5,000 point level. The index is up by 6% so far this month. Its gain measures at 130% year to date. The 30-day Bitcoin volatility index has remained virtually unchanged at close to 5.5% so far in July. The CoinMarketCap website's 24-hour traded volume indicator has surged above the $80 billion mark. This comes as the price of the crypto king rose. The Messari website's real-time volume is approaching the $4 billion territory. The Bitcoin dominance indicator has continued hitting fresh highs in more than a year as it approached the 65% mark. The top 5 digital assets are mostly trading in the red, but Bitcoin is the only exception as it stands just slightly south of the $13,000 level. Ether has held its ground above the $300 psychological level. XRP has once again moved south of the 40-cent mark. Bitcoin Cash has flipped Litecoin to grab the 4th spot by market capitalization. Litecoin is down by almost 2% and it trades at just slightly less than $120. The Coin 360 heat map showcases why the Bitcoin dominance has been rising. The top crypto is in the green while the rest of the market is mostly red. According to the Token Spread website, the XMO and BitMEX exchanges have the biggest price difference for the Bitcoin dollar pair, and it is close to 2.5%. The CEX exchange has the biggest spread, and it is 1/5%. We will now take a look at some of the characteristics of the Thunder Core project and its token. This platform is a fully decentralized method for maintaining a public Ethereum virtual machine compatible blockchain. It claims to provide both high throughput and fast confirmation times. The blockchain has its own native token called the Thunder token. Its initial exchange offering took place on the Huobi exchange, and each of the tokens was sold for 1.5 cents. After jumping by approximately 100% initially, it has settled down back near the price of the initial offering. We will now review the performance of various cryptocurrency asset classes as grouped by the Messari website. The infrastructure group is the most bearish asset class with a decline of 2.4%. The media and entertainment category shows the top increase and it is up by almost 0.4%. The financial sector is virtually unchanged, but the majority of the assets are driven by bearish sentiments. The currency category is down by more than 1%, despite the increase that posted by Bitcoin. And lastly, the services section posts a drop of close to 1.7%. SEO Coin is one of the few assets that buck the generally bearish mood. This is, of course, where the 5 major cryptocurrency categories stand so far this Wednesday. Let's now take a look at the most significant moves among the top 100 digital assets. We will then be back to discuss the markets with our crypto experts after this short break, so do not go anywhere.
180 different countries all around the world, which makes us grow in like a sphere.
We are stronger than ever.
Have these questions answered without disclosing anything.
AI field is mostly controlled by a few large corporations.
Much busier, bigger than ever.
In the mid-2020s. I do think that will come.
We should kind of keep in mind that we want the world to be a better place.
$15 billion a day. This is incredible.
People find a way to create infrastructure.
I think knowledge is one of the most important things in the world.
We laid the foundation for the distributed trust model that Satoshi builds on.
It does come with some risks, but at the same time, I think it's an opportunity for countries.
Individuals miss the boat on a market, they miss the boat. When the institutions miss the boat, they bring the boat back.
This is BloxLi TV.
We are back with our crypto experts, Jason Fernandez, COO and co-founder of AE Token, and Jose Maria Macedo, head of advisory at Amazic. Guys, great to have you. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thanks very much for having us.
Good. Absolute pleasure. So, Jose, we will come to you first. Bitcoin has continued trending up to test the $13,000 resistance today. What is your take on the most recent market moves, and where do you see the price of Bitcoin heading from here on?
Yeah, so every week I come on here and talk about Bitcoin's narrative as digital gold and how that keeps getting stronger and stronger with the global macro backdrop. And I think sort of this week is no different. What we're seeing is a combination of dovish central banks. Obviously, there's two rate decreases predicted this year. And there's also huge valuations in the equities markets. You know, the Shiller price-to-earnings ratio is as high as it's ever been. The only two times it's been as high as this was in 1929 and in 2000, two of the biggest bubbles in public market equities history. Alongside this, you have sort of a burgeoning IPO market. There's a lot of demand for yield, a lot of demand for growth. This is also caused by the falling sovereign debt yields. I think there's about 13 trillion globally of negative yielding bonds. So these are people that are losing money for holding their money, right? So all this money is out there looking for yield, looking for opportunities. And then you have this combined with a growing US budget deficit. You have talks of additional stimulus beyond conventional policies. You've got trade wars. You've got sort of Elizabeth Warren proposing a wealth tax. And I think all these forces are making the narrative for Bitcoin as a safe haven, as digital gold, as a store of value, stronger and stronger. This rally, the recent Bitcoin rally, if you look at if you overlay it on top of a gold price, you see that it actually is moving very much in line with traditional classic safe haven assets like gold, like the Japanese yen, like the Swiss franc. And you're even seeing sort of mainstream attention to this now with the Financial Times article asking if Bitcoin is ready to join the ranks of classic safe haven assets. So I think this is really important. People are starting to understand this is a safe haven asset. It's uncorrelated to other asset classes. It's generally even uncorrelated to gold, although it hasn't been the past month. And I think that's going to be driving a lot of its momentum going forward. I think the only thing I'd look out for is that I think the market may have gotten slightly ahead of itself when it comes to the near-term outlook for the Fed's upcoming rate decision. So obviously the jobs report came in on Friday, which provided further support for the Fed to remain on hold at its July meeting because non-farm payrolls came in actually much stronger than what people expected. It was 224,000 versus 160,000. And historically, the Fed has tended to cut rates after the trend in monthly non-farm payrolls rolls over much more substantially than we've seen recently. So look at the funds futures tracked by the CME's group. We still have an 100% probability of at least one 25 basis point cut at July's FOMC meeting, but we see that the odds of at least 3 rate cuts by the end of the year have dropped from 60% to 40%, and this should theoretically be somewhat bearish to risk assets, even though Bitcoin is a very specific kind of risk asset because it also acts as a safe haven. But I think that's something to keep in mind as we go forward.
And, you know, just picking up on the fact that you're saying it is that safe haven, I guess, ultimately you see that price just skyrocketing. So, Jason, we'll come back to you. What are your thoughts? And also, when do you see this price skyrocketing? Because, of course, you know, you've been bullish on our program many times. So where do you see the markets heading?
So I think Bitcoin has proved to be one of the single best hedges against the traditional financial system. We saw that, like I mentioned the other day, during the whole Hong Kong struggle, what was going on there. We saw sort of Bitcoin sell at a premium. We also saw that during the recent tension between China and the U.S., the trade war that Jose alluded to earlier. So we know that Bloomberg just published a report saying that according to data from the New York Fed, the recession risk is the highest since 2008. So the rise to 13K, while it happened quickly, did happen like the exact same way that the recent high of the June 26th happened. So this is sort of on the backs of poor financial news and the rest of the markets, and so that sort of buoyed Bitcoin's prospects. But also there was a bit of ebb and flow, and so there was sort of a back and forth. And then when finally Bitcoin broke through 13,000, it appears to be sort of holding firm at that point. So it's been a more sustainable rise that we saw like in the recent high on June 26th. And when it gets to 14K, which was what it was on June 26th, you would probably expect to see some selling anyways, because I think a lot of people were burnt by the drop from 14K to something like 9, 10K to just recently happen. So if it gets there in the next 24 hours, you probably see a more precipitous drop, something if a drawback likely to be in the high 13,000. So for example, if it crossed 14K, you could see a drawback down to maybe 13.8 the next day. If it rises past 14K in a more manageable way, there's still sort of likely to be a drawback, but it won't be as strong as if we see 14K within 24 hours.
Okay, so definitely expecting a drawback then. Now, Jason, we'll stick with you for the minute because traders have been reporting that there was a large sell position on Binance yesterday. 6,500 Bitcoin were on sale at a price of $12,100. So do you see this as profit taking after the gains that we have, of course, seen so far this year?
So one thing to remember is you put that in context, that's $79 million worth of Bitcoin. So it's certainly a huge chunk. And yes, I think it was profit-taking, especially since the sell order was just above 12K. So it sort of seems like the person said, let's try to liquidate X amount just above, like at 12,100. What's unusual is that this order was executed on Binance and not OTC, over the counter, which is where large amounts are sold typically. So usually when these sort of orders are executed on an exchange, that would almost immediately and clearly affect the market price. You couldn't expect anything different, and that's really what happened. So the massive Binance order brought the price down across other exchanges, something like $500 or 3.5%, which happened really in a matter of minutes. And while that caused this drop in the price of cryptocurrency, which fell from something like 12,600 to 12,100 in 15 minutes, the order was really filled in short order. The order was filled in short order, rather. I mean, it happened pretty quickly, and the market basically was able to absorb that. So it staggered a bit and then came back out on a bit of vengeance and past 13,000, which is what it's at right now. So I don't think it really affected it in the long term too much.
Okay, and Jason, I want to just continue with you for a sec, so I want to get some more detail because the market declined briefly on this large sell order, but the price has then since continued climbing up. So does this suggest that the bulls are in control at the moment?
Yes, I think so. So, like I said, yesterday's rise was rather quick. And now that that rise sort of came after days of lower highs and higher lows, which basically indicated that this spike was actually a breakout, and that could have signaled sort of a climb upwards, which is what we saw. And not only did it climb upwards, but Bitcoin dominance is actually 1% higher than it was, and it was already pretty high at 63%. So it's something like 64, a little over 64% right now, and that indicates that Bitcoin is still exciting to hold for a lot of these people. Bitcoin is killing alts at this point, and it also shows that the fact that the market was able to absorb such a huge sell order and sort of bounce back really quickly basically means that the bulls are in control. Yeah.
And I think, that's an opinion which is absolutely shared. We've had many people in the last few days on our program saying, well, actually now they're ditching their altcoins, they're buying up Bitcoin, and they're thinking of becoming Bitcoin maximalists. So I think maybe the tables are turning and the tide is turning. Something is happening. Exactly. So Jose, we're going to come back to you. tZERO announced yesterday that it has entered a partnership with the producers of the upcoming movie Atari, Fistful of Quarters, to tokenize the first major theatrical motion picture. Do you see this as a good way to use tokenization, and are projects like this likely to be a good investment?
Okay, but before I get to that, just to clarify sort of my position on the last question, I don't mean that my disregard for sort of short-term price, it comes across as a disregard for price as a whole, or for the potential of this asset class as a whole. I truly think when I'm talking about Bitcoin's potential as a global uncorrelated store of value, that we're talking about an asset class that will be worth in the tens of trillions in years to come. You know, the reason I'm investing sort of all my time and money in this space is because I truly believe that that's where we're going. And I prefer that opportunity is sort of so astronomical that I think I prefer to focus on that rather than the short-term price action. As for tZERO, really interesting development. I think tokenization has loads of advantages. We've written about this a lot at Amazix. The main ones are sort of built-in compliance, transparency, speed of settlement, but also like the interoperability and the programmability that they'll allow. I think eventually we could see this unlock much higher levels of liquidity, although that isn't the case just yet because the infrastructure just isn't there. And we really believe that in the future, every single asset, currency, commodity, and bond will be tokenized. However, to start with, we think the really obvious use cases are stuff like real estate and like films, which are traditionally illiquid, and they're also indifferent to the source of capital. So whereas a startup, you want more from your investors than just capital. You want advice, you want brand, you want potentially follow-on capital. For something like a film or real estate, you're really interested in just the capital. And I think this is a really good use case for tokenization, and it's the reason that we see most security token projects start off in these kinds of areas. And I think the film industry really qualifies here. You know, we were fortunate enough to work with a project called Decentralized Pictures. It was actually a subsidiary of American Zoetrope, which was founded by Francis Ford Coppola, don't know how you pronounce it, and is run by his son, Roman Coppola. So we got to learn a lot about the film industry. And what we learned about film financing is that basically it's controlled by a very small number of gatekeepers who control who and what gets funded, and they don't accept leads from outside their network, and they don't read unsolicited material. So what this means is it leads to a really limited talent pool actually being able to get funding, which leads to lower quality results. There's a lot of censorship, there's lack of diversity, there's lack of original content. You know, I think all of us have noticed that over the past few years, sort of Hollywood movies getting more and more formulaic. And then there's obviously the issues with Hollywood accounting. You know, the joke goes that Hollywood's most creative minds are actually in accounting. Because most, you know, even very successful films like mysteriously fail to make any money for their sort of backers. So I think all these issues can sort of really be addressed quite well by tokenization, and the potential for security tokens here is huge. You know, in terms of democratizing the funding process, it's much easier to find an investor willing to pay $50,000 than it is an investor willing to pay $50 million to fund a movie. You know, in terms of transparency, security tokens should provide much greater transparency with stuff like accounting and stuff like live accounting eventually, although at the beginning this will still be an issue. And then I think it will also tap into a lot of investor demand for these types of alternative assets. You know, as equity markets heat up, as we spoke about before, and the correlations between assets are higher than ever, what we see is huge demand from investors for alternative assets. You know, there's a recent report by sort of KKR about family offices that's showing that family offices, I think ultra high net worths are investing 46% of their portfolio into alternative assets. And we're seeing this grow and grow and grow over the past 10 years. So I really think this kind of stuff, tokenization of movies, will have huge advantages for the film industry and for investors as well.
Well, I think it's absolutely fascinating, really, just to hear how tokenization, how this entire space is actually, in some ways, like you said, going hand in hand with the film industry. You know, you said it really does qualify for it. So I don't think that's something extremely obvious to the general person. So absolutely fascinating. Jason, we'll come back to you. What are your thoughts on this for us, please?
Yes, I mean, it's a really interesting concept. The problems that sort of tZERO is solving has been around for a while. I mean, it's been acknowledged. It was probably the initiator of the whole concept of Indiegogo and Kickstarter and crowdfunding in the first place. I think a lot of the crowdfunding the platforms that start off, certainly Indiegogo, essentially the plan was to fund movies. So this is a problem that was well known in the community, particularly in the filmmaking community. The whole whole concept of indie films and essentially how does one fund these indie films. So it's certainly like a unique concept. Essentially what they've done is they partnered with the movie producers to develop a token called Bushnell, which is named after Noel Bushnell, who is basically the subject of this film, the person who essentially came up with Atari, one of the founders of Atari. And essentially the token owners are going to get a share of the movie profits, as well as receive additional benefits like the ability to vote on the movie's trailer, make a point of essentially choosing the movie's cast. A lot of these have actually already been done by Kickstarter and Indiegogo. So a lot of these sort of, what do they call sort of things to induce people to go ahead and put some money into the project, like particularly with Kickstarter, where you get sort of these rewards for putting in certain money. So you might be able to choose a cast, you might be able to get certificates or signed posters, pictures, things like that. So a lot of that has been done already. We also know that there's 21M coin, which was recently released. It was like a copyright token that essentially allowed that entitled the owner to sort of share in the copyright and pay out royalties and benefits sort of in perpetuity. So where you would sort of use a token to support a business where the staff, the cast, the crew were all getting paid sort of the same in the same tokens, and sort of that sort of divided their ability to get residuals down the line, and sort of made production budgets go farther. And with more bang for the buck, and so it sort of stripped out a lot of the middleman fees. But sort of what's unique about this is sort of the share in movie earnings. So being able to receive a share in the profits of a movie is something that they're doing that is somewhat unique that I haven't quite heard of, and that's interesting. The question is that sort of makes it a security token, because people have sort of in basically buying that with the purpose of getting a return. And on the same end, there are other people buying those tokens for different reasons. So they might be buying the token to vote on a movie's trailer. So how would you resolve that and say these people bought the tokens as a utility and these people bought the tokens as a security? So that's something I see as a potential problem going forward, how they would justify that to regulators.
I think interesting, though, that you've highlighted some of the issues going forward. But, with all of that in mind, you think you're absolutely right. It is incredibly unique and actually very exciting to see what's going to happen next, where this is going to take us. Now, Jose, we'll come back to you because Samsung has already rocked the crypto markets previously when it announced a partnership with Engine. And there are reports that the company has now made the beta version of its Ethereum software development kit available to partner developers. So is this likely to be a bullish boost for Ether?
So definitely, I think there are a lot of bullish boosts for Ether going on right now. Obviously, Ether is by far the network that has the largest number of developers and the largest amount of development activity going on top of it. I think there's very little doubt about that, although the numbers are still small compared to what they will be if we need to reach mainstream adoption, which suggests that some of these competitors might have more of a chance than we think. But I think one of the main questions is, how does this activity and the applications built on top of Ether actually translate to a higher value of Ether? Because what we see with Ether right now, and this will change with proof of stake, is Ether is sort of a medium of exchange that's used to pay fees to run smart contracts on the platform, right? So it is possible for an application that's run on top of Ethereum to be more valuable than Ethereum, depending how much stuff it's putting on chain and how much it uses Ethereum. So I think, I'm a big Ethereum fan and a big Ethereum bull, but I think sort of the biggest questions surrounding Ethereum are not about developer activity, because they're 100% winning on that. I went to Ethereum this year in New York, and it was just crazy to see how much cool stuff is going on in Ethereum. I think the biggest question is rather an economic one, which is to say, how will Ether actually capture some of the value that's created by the Ethereum network? As in, even if we have scalability and we have loads of really successful decentralized applications running on top of Ethereum, how is it that Ether will capture some of that value? And I think sort of the narratives that we're settling on is that it needs to become a store of value, and it is sort of doing that with being used as collateral and maker and stuff like that. But it remains to be seen, I think, how successfully that can be done.
Okay, but overall, definitely quite positive. Like you said, you think this will be a bullish boost for Ether. So, Jason, of course, we'll come back to you. Let's have your thoughts on this.
So Jose made the point. He is talking really about fundamental usage and essentially how does using Ethereum for this actually add value to Ethereum, and where is the value actually created? But also you have to remember that this is a retail market and it's extremely hype driven. And Samsung, is a large organization, a leading manufacturer of mobile phones, other products, and sort of this SDK will aid consumers in operating accounts, permit digital signatures as needed for transactions, and also support Ledger and Trezor, so and sort of other wallets too. So that sort of increased usage and adoption, and also the hype value that something like that brings is significant. And the way they've set it up is that for now, only those who are currently partners with Samsung will have access to that blockchain. And using this, sort of payments will be more fluid. Web dApps will be running on essentially a blockchain specialized browser. And it's important to realize that in contrast to Engine, so Engine was a really tiny coin. And so when they announced the Samsung news, it had a really huge effect on its market cap. In contrast, Ethereum is already a very, very large coin. It's probably like second or third ranked crypto on the planet. So the effect that it would have announcing sort of a partnership with Samsung is going to be much more muted. And while Samsung has been instrumental in making strides when it comes to cryptocurrency adoption, the sort of effect that it's going to have for Ethereum is going to be definitely more muted than it had for Engine. But overall, it is going to be positive, I think.
Hey, thank you for your thoughts there. Now, just finally, Jason, we will just stick with you. BitTorrent Speed was announced a couple of days ago. This is a software that connects and rewards users with BitTorrent tokens. BitTorrent tokens will, of course, be integrated into new downloads of uTorrent clients. So, Jason, do you see that there could be regulatory issues with this, and is this likely to be a bullish factor for the BitTorrent token?
So yeah, I mean, long term, it's clearly a bullish factor for the BitTorrent token. Certainly, people that already own BitTorrent tokens are likely to be happy that this happened. The way it's set up is the BitTorrent website sort of says that the users will be paid in BTT, which is BTT tokens, in exchange for seeding and providing bandwidth, and that sort of earns them more tokens. The longer they seed files and attain faster downloads, the more of the token that they're willing to spend. So an integrated wallet is going to be launched to enable users to manage those tokens, and it's something that people that currently own those tokens are probably really happy about. But nobody knows how many new tokens have been purchased yet. And while it's operational right now, so you can currently download the software and actually use it, most people are using the 10 free tokens that they get anyway, and they haven't purchased any new tokens. So that means that the speed increase that they're receiving is at the cost of all people that are using older clients that don't have that software built in. So it's not really, we haven't really seen how many new tokens are being purchased. So it's great that it's in operation, it actually exists, but we don't quite know what the full effect is yet.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. And Jose, just finally, we'll finish with you. What are your thoughts on the BitTorrent token, please?
Yeah, I mean, in principle, I think the BitTorrent token is super interesting. Obviously, BitTorrent is the world's largest decentralized network. It has over 100 million users, although Tron claimed 1 billion. I think it's closer to 170 million. And in some areas, it accounts for sort of 70% of web traffic. So, and what's interesting is that they managed to build this decentralized network without incentives. So, fundamentally and in principle, adding incentives to a network like this should allow it to scale much quicker, and it should make perfect sense. But I think there are some sort of challenges to this, and obviously Tron is quite a polarizing project, and at Amazix we try and take quite a rational look at things. But it is true that Tron is incredibly centralized right now. It does achieve higher scalabilities, although how much is being contested. But it is super centralized. It has sort of has PR issues in the past with stuff like the white paper, a lot of the code being plagiarized from Ethereum. And although the BTT token seems interesting, a lot of the team left, obviously, with the BitTorrent purchase, and a lot of them are doubtful that technically this can even be executed, that the token can even run on Tron. It's not clear that whether obviously BitTorrent is a huge network, and it's not clear whether even with 10,000 transactions per second that Tron claims, whether it could actually scale to the level that it needs to run BitTorrent. There's also the fact that the token itself is running on a high-performance private ledger, which basically means it's going to be run on a centralized server, which leads to all the risks of centralization and fraud, which kind of negates the benefit of blockchain, although it is possible that they'll decentralize over time. In terms of I think there's also a deeper point to make in terms of the economic factors, which is, obviously there might be a case for the token to be used on the platform in that it makes the user experience on the platform better, but this doesn't necessarily make it a good investment. What we've seen is that medium of exchange tokens, which is basically what BTC will be, it will be used in order to pay for bandwidth and to auction for bandwidth. They accrue very high velocity, and it's very difficult for them to accrue value in the long term because people just buy them to use the platform, and then the people who are providing the service sell them straight afterwards. So it's very difficult for these tokens to accrue value. And then when you add on to this the fact that only 7% of the token supply was made available in the public sale, and the fact that the token is not actually mandatory on the platform, it's optional, means that while this may make sense for the ecosystem and for BitTorrent and hopefully help them scale, it might not necessarily make sense as an investment, although obviously this is not investment advice.
It's never investment advice. Jose, Jason, as always, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having both of you on the line with us today. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Now, before we sign off, I do have a last-minute update from our editorial staff regarding the crypto market. Bitcoin has managed to cross the 13K line, but it appears to be facing heavy resistance around this level. Trading activity has slowed down slightly. The coin market cap website's daily traded volume indicator has slipped below the $80 billion mark. While the top cryptocurrency is making some gains, the majority of the digital assets remain in the red. Well, that's all for this Wednesday's Crypto Now live show. We thank Jose and Jason for their expert analysis. We thank the audience for joining us and invite you all to accompany us every weekday at the same time.